Hello, Tom. It's an honor to have you here with us today, and thank you for coming. Tom is one of the top figures in the global out-of-home, and we do appreciate your time and your desire to come and join this interview.
Thank you, Jane, and it's really nice to be back in Moscow. It's one of my favorite cities. It fills me full of energy. When I come to Moscow, I really feel that I'm in a world capital and that I'm in an important place.
How would you describe the global ad market shape today, and particularly the shape of the out-of-home industry nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to be really happy about the way the global ad market is going at the moment. If you look, practically every country on 5 continents, are showing high single-digit growth overall. When you look behind that, you see some variances. So, for example, you still have some of the legacy media like print and terrestrial television that are declining. So, the disproportionate element of that growth comes from the digital side, and particularly the online side of the business, but the overall trend is high single-digit growth. As far as out-of-home is concerned, I think out-of-home is really in a great place because of all the reasons in terms of outdoor embracing the digital age, the investment that's going in, the trends towards automation, and of course the main currency of any media is the audience, and we find all of the research shows us that people are moving out of home. People are spending more time outdoor, and the audience is growing, which is one of the few media that has experienced an audience growth. So I think outdoor is in a very good place, a very exciting place, and this is why it's attracting so many new investors.
Out-of-home market is getting global, and we've seen a lot of acquisitions going on recently in many parts of the world. So do you think is a trend how the globalization will work for the market?
Firstly, I think out-of-home is emerging as one of the few remaining mass audience markets. So you can really get a global presence in out-of-home at a time when a lot of other media are fragmenting. I think the second thing is there is a lot of consolidation, and the reason what's driving that is the need for out-of-home to become more efficient, for it to become more automated, and to compete harder against big tech for big slices of audience. So advertisers now want to access large-scale audiences fast, efficiently, and confidently. And you can't do that if you're a fragmented market. So I think if the medium doesn't consolidate and start behaving in a more collaborative way, we won't be able to compete as effectively with the big digital, online and large tech media operators. So I think it's a very good thing, consolidation, and I think you're going to see a lot more.
We know that 5% of the out-of-home locations in the UK generate almost 50% of the revenue. Do you personally believe that digital will replace classic out-of-home completely?
Very good question, Jane. No, I don't. I think all of the international out-of-home markets will experience digital out-of-home growth, but I don't foresee that being a 100% digital market. I think the classic side of the business is always going to have an important role, and I think it will find its own level. There are a number of clients who need to have a constant presence in the marketplace, and they need to have literally exclusive exposure 24/7 for exposure. In the UK, Sky Television is the same. They use constant out-of-home media to promote their programs, which are ever changing, and they always require a long-term classic presence. So I think the future for classic is very sound.
Do you think in this classic segment and in out-of-home, the transit media is getting a particularly new role, having its advantages which are very important in the modern world, where the ad avoidance is that high and so on?
Yeah, well, firstly, and you know this, I love transit medium. I think it's a fantastic medium, and it has a number of unique attributes that roadside out-of-home doesn't have. The point we made earlier about the reduction in classic inventory in favor of digital, I think that plays to the strength of transport, because you've got such an array of classic formats. But there are other things that I think suggest that the future for transit advertising is very bright. So for example, transit can go into areas that out-of-home traditionally can't get. They're usually downtown where there's tremendous amount of retail activity, so advertisers want to be influencing their customers at the point of sale. It's a public asset. I think it's been around for a long time, and there's a high level of trust and loyalty in advertising that appears on transit, for sure. Around the world, there's a lot more investment going into transit infrastructure, and the usage is increasing. So I think transit advertising has a pivotal role to play going forward, and has a great future in the urban environment.
Why the UK enjoys such a huge share of transit advertising?
One of the reasons why transit advertising is very big in the UK is because there has been a tradition of people using transit advertising much more in the UK. So, you know, for example, in London, the people who use the public transport systems are very high-scale people. You know, you have celebrities, you have politicians, you have, you know, C-suite business people using the medium. I go to work on the tube and on the bus. I use it. It's regarded as a very good social medium of transport as well. But also the point I made earlier about this massive investment going in. In London we have the introduction of a multi-billion-pound Crossrail project that's going in at the moment. All of the London bus routes have had grants to increase the number of buses on the routes. They have bus lanes dedicated. The fastest way to get around London now is on a bus. The investment around the world in public transportation infrastructure is increasing hugely.
So, in your experience, what do you think is the best model for cooperation between the transport company, between the municipalities, and between the operator? How does it work in different countries, in the UK, for example?
And there is a definite pattern now of partnership emerging. There was a time when the transit company would just look for a fixed guarantee. There was a time when some would just look for a revenue share. And then some would look for a little mixture of both of those things. What tends to happen now is, I think there's a realization, because of some bad partnerships on the part of the transit operators, that you have to have a true partnership with a very reputable experienced media owner. Because running transit advertising demands, you know, high level of expertise. You also have safety that comes into it. So you really have to use an operator that has proven track record in that market. And the business model tends to be now where the transit company would identify a reputable transit advertising media expert, form a 5 to 10 year partnership, and have a revenue share agreement. But the government companies particularly are interested in this revenue share, because they always are short of revenues for public usage.
Do you think internet advertising is a competitor or an extra opportunity for future cooperation and consolidation?
I think the honest answer to that is both. I think it's a very credible competitor. They have come up with a very direct model with their consumers. You have to pay for it in advance, so they have an advantage in terms of the financial base. And they clearly are reaching out to a whole new platform of users. But at the same time, I think there's a huge opportunity, as we saw at the conference in Dubai, when we were listening to Marc-Antoine, the CEO of Kinetic Globally, talking about connectivity. I think there's a huge opportunity for out-of-home and digital out-of-home to connect with that much bigger pie and gain a much larger share of the programmatic and internet spend.
Do you personally believe in the power of programmatic buying and artificial intellect, or you think that people should remain in some positions for some type of jobs for the out of home?
Very good question, Jane. I mean, firstly on programmatic, can we access a lot of the programmatic budgets that we're not accessing now? Yes, is the answer. We can, and with improved automation, I think we can do this. I think JC2Co should be applauded for the initiative of setting up this this global platform called View, which will give, it's open to everybody to join and give out-of-home media operators the chance to access programmatic budgets. That said, I think we have to be careful that outdoor isn't a one-size-fits-all. There are unique assets, and I think on pricing we have to make sure that out-of-home doesn't become commoditized like online. So we've got to get the balance, we've got to make sure we have the right controls and that the right attributes are fed in there. Your second question about do I see a situation where we're fully automated and robotic, I think there's going to be more automation, but we will also need to have people involved, because advertisers have different geographic needs, different seasonal needs, different focuses at different times, and we will always need to have a customized approach to media planning. But I certainly think the balance will shift a bit more in favor of automation.
Have you ever tried selling advertising by leads or clicks?
Is there an out-of-home equivalent to the click model? The answer to that is no. I think that there have been a few trials, and I think we will, in the next 5 to 10 years, be selling out of home based on audience. But at the moment, it's still sold based on scores, on route scores, and it's still planned based on geography. But more and more people are looking at different pricing models, being more relevant to the audience that is being bought in terms of pricing. There are some media that are at the point of sale, and there's a system called EPOS, electronic point of sale measurement, that can measure the movement, the shelf movement of products when a campaign is running versus when it's not running. But by and large, we are not able to measure the ROI on a campaign by campaign basis. And because also the creative varies quite a bit, which we're not in control of. But what we do have are compilation sets of research that show the trends when out of home is introduced into the media mix and how it enhances the shelf movement or the brand recognition. Every CMO and every CEO and everybody who works in out of home really knows it works and really knows it does a great job, but we haven't been able to exactly measure it as yet.
Talking about measurement, in the UK you have Root, in the US there is Geopath, in some countries we have Quende and some other companies providing data and measurement and so on. So do you really think the measurement system should be globalized and we need to have one currency globally, and we can do that? Or the differences between the countries and the markets are so strong that it's just impossible to share one model between all the markets?
It's a great question and a topical question. In my WOO role at the moment, this is a question I get asked in a lot of markets, particularly in LATAM at the moment, where they're looking at that whole area. What people have to understand is with Ruth and with Geopath in the United States, those systems have been built over many years, decades, and they have been developed jointly by the industry body, the JICPAR bodies, which include the agencies and the clients, and they have been funded, by the three stakeholders, the media owner, the agency, and the clients. It took a long time to get consensus on the methodology, but we did, and now it's trusted because it was developed in conjunction with the other stakeholders. I think to assume that that would happen in other markets quickly is a bit ambitious, but what we do have is the methodology. And for example, if you said to me, do I prefer route over geopath, I would say there are some ingredients better in both parts. If we got maybe a mixture of the two, we'd have the perfect child. But there's no reason why we shouldn't look at sharing the methodology in those systems and to try and to look at coming up with a global system that covers all of outdoor. That would be my dream, but it's going to take time. Well, I think firstly, if we look at the methodology first, the methodology is something that's there, but the part owners of that are the media owners like JCDecaux and Clear Channel and the international companies like Exterion, Global Radio. And it's in their interest to have that methodology spread. But at the same time, it has been developed and funded by the UK and American media owners. So they should get a return on that investment if they're going to roll it out. But I think what we need, and perhaps the WOOHO is the platform for that. I think we need to have a global study group to look at what is currently available and to see is there a way of working on a 5-year plan of coming up with something that would serve the whole global community so that we don't keep reinventing the wheel. There is another initiative that the WOOHO is facilitating now on connectivity, and maybe this could be a second project. I think the UK and the US industries would be willing to cooperate on that basis in a structured way.
What is your views on the out-of-home market in Russia? Has it changed? What is its shape? How do you see the market in comparison to other out-of-home markets globally?
The Russian market is very dear to my heart because, as you mentioned, I spent a few years here as chairman of Gallery, so I know it probably better than most international people. It's not just having been here for the last few days, but I was in St. Pete's in October for your brilliant conference, and I must congratulate you on staging a world-class congress. The fundamentals are great for the Russian out-of-home market. You can't go around Moscow without seeing spectacular displays, both classic and digital, but that there's a lot of work to be done on audience measurement and on effectiveness, on proving to the advertiser that this is working for them.
Can you tell about generic advertising instruments? Which marketing tools should we actually need to do that?
I think as an industry we don't do enough of that. That is because in the past the trade association model wasn't as strong as it's emerging now. I think this really backs into a bigger subject, which is the whole question of collaboration through trade bodies and through consolidation. I mean, for example, in Ocean, we run a campaign every year for Ocean in the Financial Times. You would never think that was a medium that an out-of-home company would use, but we use it very effectively to talk to the financial community and the C-suite business people. Yes, I think cross-media platform promotion should be part of it, but we should use our own media as well.
Tom, so how do you see the future of the out-of-home advertising?
Jean-Charles, I think you did a fantastic paper in Dubai. By the way, in the post-conference evaluation, he scored the highest in terms of presentation. I thought it was excellent.
And it was interactive.
Yeah, it was interactive too.
People like to vote.
Yes, they do. Very democratic. I think much of what he says is true, and the CEO of Ocean believes that we are in the all-screen market. That out-of-home now is a screen, just like mobile, and we are part of that big screen market, which is similar to what Jean-Charles was saying. I do believe that, and I think outdoor has a huge part to play in that. You also realize that a lot of advertisers who've over-invested in activation on online are losing brand awareness. So they're pulling budgets back into, out of home because it's such a great branding medium. Outdoor will have a pivotal role in that exciting media mix of the future going forward. And digital will play a big part in that. So many positive things happen, the investment, the audience growing naturally, automation, you have technology, facial recognition, vehicle recognition, hotspot, Wi-Fi locations, and interactive experiential. But to realize that, I think we really have to embrace, not just verbally, but by actions, we have to embrace collaboration. I do believe that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if in each country we can project a more unified medium, we will win a lot of revenues from the big tech companies and from the traditional media that are in decline.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to have you here with us today. And I think it's a perfect opportunity and the right moment to help Russian industry globalize and to invite members of our industry to take part in the Congress, which is due in Toronto next year, which you organize as WOOHO.
Thanks, Jane, for giving me the opportunity just to plug the WOOHO Congress in Toronto. It's taking place next June. It's the follow-up to our Dubai Congress, which was hugely successful. We had 455 people from 40 countries, all sharing their experiences. We had unprecedented feedback in terms of the quality of the presentations, and it's a key date in the annual calendar for networking. Toronto is a great city. We confidently expect that there will be over 500 people attending the Toronto Congress, and everybody in Russia is hereby welcome.